So now that the brackets are out, we know who is in the open division. We know who's in 6A. I wanted to have Jason Jewell, the head football coach at Brophy, and an alum of Sports360AZ, who covers the high school scene, covered it for years and then does a great job over at Brophy, and then Jordan Ham, of course, in the recruiting roundup. All right, guys, let's just be free-flowing here. I thought in the open division, to me, to see Desert Edge as the 8th seed was nothing more than we got to get clicks on our website, and we got to get chatter going for the entire week. To me, Desert Edge was one of the top 4 teams that I saw in person. I don't know how South Point is there. Sorry, Tucson. If the AIA felt they had to have representation, that's on them. Those are some of my early hits. Jason, what did you see coming right out of the gate on the open?
Yeah, I agree with you. The Desert Edge being an 8 seed seems kind of low. They do have a solid body of work. I know they beat Cactus, Ironwood, Sunrise Mountain, and O'Connor, I believe. So they have solid body of work, and then they're loaded with Division I football players. Their Carter's done a good job of what Coach Wellbrock and Lucero kind of started at Desert Edge and continuing that. To be honest, I'm really happy for my old high school head coach, John Bechtold, over at Corona del Sol. I don't think they've lost a game in their program this year at any level. So fired up. I know they get to play a very tough Hamilton football team, but I'm excited for Coach Bechtold.
What's going on over there, Jason? What are you hearing about Corona del Sol? Because they clearly are the Cinderella story.
Yeah, I mean, Coach has done a great job. He labored for years at Washington, my alma mater, and moved around, went to Greenway and then to Corona, and he's a fantastic football coach. I always thought he was one of the most underrated guys, coaches in the state, and I'm glad that he's having success. I'm gonna try to get out to that game this week.
Jordan, what are you seeing in Corona del Sol? Let's just get right into that, and then some of your other thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's an all-around really solid team. And I think a lot of people, the people that kind of doubt Corona del Sol will look at their schedule and it's not the strongest body of work, but look, many years you can't really control who you play, especially this year. Right. You can't control who you play. You just have to get games in, and they were able to do that. And they didn't get they didn't have a loss in their entire program. So that's a great body of work. Jake Schmidt, a guy who is committed to NAU, is a really good football player, plays, on both sides of the ball. And I think this is just an all around solid football team. So great to see a name I don't think was really on anyone's radar coming into this year, to see them get into the open. Now we'll see, what they can do against the best of the best. So looking forward to that one.
I saw them in person, guys, when they played Basha, and they just physically pushed Basha around. It was early in the year when Basha was playing a true freshman quarterback, and they're still doing it. I think he was on roller skates a little bit that night. But Corona del Sol just looked well coached, well disciplined. And I thought to myself, leaving that game, that's going to be a team that's there in the postseason. Can they give Hamilton, Jason, a game at all?
Yeah, they're going to give them a game. Obviously it's going to be a tough one. They're the underdog, and they should be. Hamilton loaded. They're a good football team. So, but coach is good for a couple trick plays here and there, and some onside kicks and things like that. He'll keep the Huskies on their toes.
Stick with you, Jason, for a second. Just overall, when you look at the open top to bottom, is there anybody that can touch Chandler, or are we just merely playing out the string?
Yeah, I mean, we saw, Friday night, everyone thought Hamilton was 2 seed, and obviously they probably still are. I mean, their win is over a big win over Saguaro, lose by 20 to Chandler on Friday night. So obviously Chandler is the big dog, and rightfully so. I think Hamilton does deserve to be the 2 seed, and Saguaro to be right there in the mix, being that 3 seed, with their lone loss being to Hamilton in a close one, also on national TV. I think
you played them early in the year. You played Saguaro.
Yeah, we did. They're good. Their defensive line's got 4 Division I players. I don't know that even we averaged 1 yard per carry against them, and you have to prepare for them on offense. Basically, 2 different styles of offense. Their one quarterback is a runner, and the other one throws the ball around. So it's tough to prepare for those guys. Plus, they're just loaded with Division I football players.
Jordan, when you look at Saguaro, is this the best team that Jason has put out on the field, or are they still coming together? I've seen them twice. I saw them against Hamilton. I saw them the following week against Castile. It was 2 different teams because the transfers were eligible. Have they had time to gel, come together? All those questions that every team seems to be dealing with in this postseason.
They're one of the best. I'd say last year's team is probably the best to ever come through. When you have the number one cornerback in the state, and you have on the opposite side, Jacoby Covington, who was an absolute monster as well. They had a really strong senior class, but the well certainly is not dry there. That, like Jason mentioned, that defensive line is probably the best in the state, most talented in the state. And then you have some really talented but young players. That's the thing. They're a little more unproven than maybe past years, but they certainly have the talent there. And Chandler, I think, is in the driver's seat, but like Jason said, I would say that Hamilton is in the mix. We'll see where Nico Marchio's health is moving forward. That could be a huge factor. But then Saguaro also is a very well-coached team, and Rick Garrettson's not going to look over them by any means whenever they meet up potentially down the road.
I think Desert Edge is going to give Chandler a game. And guys, I saw Chandler Highland. I did that game for UView a couple weeks back. I'll get to Highland in a minute. But seeing Chandler, they are methodical and they go about their business. The one place where Highland had them a little bit was they would put together the 13, 14, 15 play drives a couple of times and kept Chandler's offense off the field. Easier said than done. I get it. That's why they haven't lost a game in 3 years. But I don't see this as like last year where Shapp was the one playing at Chandler, and that game was over before the ball even got kicked off in the open. I think this 1-8 may be a little bit more competitive. Agree, disagree, Jordan?
I think it'll be competitive, but I think the difference there, though, with Chandler is, like you said, Highland able to string together some long drives. Chandler rolls about 3 deep, where they can just throw out a completely new defensive line, and those are probably D1 talents as well. So the depth, I think, is really where they separate themselves, so they can sustain that. If the top players are maybe a little bit winded, they can get out, and the guy stepping in might be maybe a year or two behind, but talent-wise, maybe the same ceiling. So, but I think Desert Edge is a very good team. I think that they have the talent to make this a game. But ultimately, like I said, I think Chandler's in the driver's seat in this bracket.
Jason,
well, you look at Desert Edge, though, they're loaded. We know that. But Chandler is super loaded. Like, I think they had like 21 kids with Division I offers. And then just you look at the body of work, Chandler is undefeated, but with huge wins over Hamilton and Saguaro, the next 2 seeds in the Open 8. So while I do think Desert Edge is a quality football team with a good body of work themselves, but Chandler, I think, is the clear-cut number 1.
Jason, talk a little bit from a coaching view, Centennial, Liberty. Here's 2 teams we haven't really talked about much. You've seen them.
Well, we played against them, and they kicked our butt, both of them. And then I went to the game on Friday night because we were shut down. Our last game against Williamsfield was not played. So I live next to Liberty and walked on over there and saw a good football game. So I think there will be people that will question Liberty being in with 3 losses, especially one of them being to Sunrise Mountain, who they're the 5A number 1, but people might question that a little bit. But good, physical, big football teams that are also very, very well coached. I really like both of their defensive. Andrew Taylor at Centennial does a fantastic job, and then Travis Guinea, who came over from Desert Edge, is doing a great job at Liberty. These guys fly around and smack each other, and Liberty had the lead at halftime, 21-14, and then Centennial kind of took over. Liberty turned the ball over a couple times late. I don't love these rematch games, especially back-to-back. Mm-hmm. But
why don't you like them?
It's just not fun to me. Like, you play, the kids who play 2 weeks in a row. That's not fun. When you play a team again, one, it's tough to beat a team twice, but yeah, I don't know. I just don't love it. Maybe if it was spread out, it'd be a little bit different, but to play them back to back, I don't know if that's a whole lot of fun.
So you're lining up against those 2 teams. Where do you see an advantage for Centennial or Liberty in a rematch next week?
Well, Centennial on offense, their offensive line is just huge. And then they're very deep at running back. They have 2 or 3 kids that can really go. And that's ultimately what ended up happening on Friday night was Centennial's run game was able to kind of take over and pound the football a little bit.
It's good for the East Valley, or the West Valley, I should say, Jordan, because we've heard a lot about East Valley football, so on and so forth, and it's just been Centennial and maybe every now and then. But now Liberty's established. They're there every year, either 6A or in the Open now in the 2nd season. I think it speaks well with Desert Edge too in their rise.
Yeah, you'll hear on Twitter all the times about the debate of what's truly West Side and what's West Valley. I don't know. We'll say west of the 17.
Yeah,
but those teams, yes, it's you. usually see Desert Edge as a very consistent program. Over the past few years, they've been able to take it to the next level, not only in their competition, but in who is getting recruited from these big time programs. Same goes for Liberty. They are a very consistent program. I think that's kind of the name brand for these top programs on the west side of the valley is they're consistent. They play really sound football. They play physical football. They're the type that, like in pool basketball, some people will splash you while you're shooting. All of these teams try to drown you. So they want to out physical you. So that's kind of been the name brand. And you're seeing more and more of these programs make the ascension, and Centennial really continue to play at that high level.
How about Liberty keeping it rolling with, a brand new head coach and a new defensive coordinator? I mean, good for Coach Thomas.
All right, let's switch over to 6A, guys. What jumped out at you, Jason, in the 6A bracket?
Man, that's a bracket that I thought was very, very deep. And you look at the two teams that didn't make it, Williamsfield and Mesa Mountain View, that were right there. It's hard to keep those guys out. And then when you go back and you look at all the games, and everybody's body of work is a little bit different. Some are playing 8 games and some are 7, and it's crazy. So you can start looking at matchups and who beat who, and Boulder Creek, lost to Castile by 1, but they were winning. And you go back and then you look at who Castile lost to. It's just crazy. So I think that is a wide open race there. But looking at it, feel bad for Williamsfield and Mesa Mountain View not getting in, but at the same time, who do you take out? Where Chaparral has that convincing win against Pinnacle to ultimately get them in. It's who do you take out versus who needs to be in.
Jordan?
The two matchups in the first round that jump out to me, Highland and Castile, I think two styles. It's going to be the really strong passing offense against the really strong passing defense of Highland. And then also Chaparral and Queen Creek. Chaparral is not your typical 7 seed. It's much like Hamilton last year in the open division. They were in the 2 to 3 range and then lost to Chandler. All of a sudden they dropped to 7. That wasn't your typical 7 seed. And I think that's the case with Chaparral. I swung by towards the third quarter of that Chaparral Pinnacle game, and it was already like running clock. Like they had already pulled the starters because they were that far ahead. Brayton Silbor, he's taken advantage of every opportunity that he's gotten. They haven't been able to play a ton of games this year, but when he's on the field, he's making big plays with his arms, with his legs as well. And then the defense has some playmakers as well. Jack Witten in the secondary, committed to Brown right now. And then Anthony Lucas, just a monster on the defensive line. So, Queen Creek, I think Joe Germain knows not to overlook Chaparral just because they're a 7 seed and they're the 2 seed. But this is going to be a really good matchup with a lot of D1 talent on the field.
So, Jason, I'm going to go back to something you said on Liberty with 3 losses. Having seen Highland in person, to me, you can make the argument that Highland could have been in the open. They lost to Queen Creek. One of their top offensive linemen was contact traced the day of the game. Didn't play. That's not good in a game like that. Then they play Hamilton and Chandler in back-to-back weeks. And they gave Chandler a game for about the first few minutes. Chandler had him on the ropes. Highland came back. I really like where Highland is as a team coming into this. I think, Chaparral, it looks like, Jordan, they've come along, but they didn't play Saguaro. That game got wiped out. Is it fair to teams, to Jason's point? I saw Williamsfield twice, and it was typical Steve Campbell. They lost early in the season, didn't look great, and then they just started mowing over people and winning close games too. So I know this is really an uncertain year, but I think the 6A is wide open. Jacob Cisneros is probably the wild card in all this for Boulder Creek. As he goes, so go they, right?
Yeah, and Bear Milichek at quarterback at Boulder Creek, he's a fantastic football player too. We tried to take out Cisneros, and at the very end, they just ran like 6 quarterback runs with Bear and basically won that game. So Boulder Creek, a 1-point loss to Castile really early in the year. They're playing fantastic.
And they have been Boulder Creek game, and that was in that game. Cisneros had over 300 yards of total offense. He was like Christian McCaffrey, and it was very, very close. I mean, you can make the argument for them as a 1 seed, Jordan.
And they're up in the very northern part of the valley. And I think that they're fine kind of being off everybody's radar a little bit. They're going to go handle what they need to go handle. And they've had some guys maybe get overlooked the past couple of years on the recruiting front that are very, very talented. And we've seen Hendricks Johnson do what he has done at NAU. But now they're the 1 seed. So the eyes are on them. So Bear, I love when he steps out on the field. He has a swagger to him where it's just like, I know I'm good. I'm going to go get my guys the ball and we're going to see what's going to happen. It's a confidence, not a cockiness. And Cisneros is just this workhorse that can help you in so many different ways. And they have some size up front as well. So I think that they're a very intriguing 6A 1 seed option.
Were they the right seed as a 1 seed, Jason?
I mean, they have one loss, to a very good Castile football team. So, I mean, I'm sure Queen Creek could make the argument that they need to be there, or even Highland, like you said, they're a 4 seed with 3 losses. The 3 losses ultimately why they're down there. But then you turn around, just like you mentioned, Liberty has 3 losses and they're in the open, where Highland gave Chandler fits just a couple of weeks ago. So you said it. This is a wide open 6A race, and this is what makes high school football fun.
Jordan, you good with Boulder Creek? I'm
good with Boulder Creek as the 1 seed. For the most part, they delivered. And yeah, their only loss was to a 1 point loss to a good Castile team. There are plenty of options here, even though I think that Boulder Creek team knows they're the 1 seed. They know that they're going to have to deliver for the next 3 weeks if they want to be the 6A champion. It doesn't really matter necessarily that they're the 1 seed, because when you look through this bracket and it's just 8 teams, it's 8 pretty darn good teams. And we've talked about the teams that haven't made it that are so good. So this is a really good group. So I think they know they're going to have to deliver and prove the committee, prove the computers right that they're the 1 seed.
Yeah, I think Boulder Creek 1 seed. I think South Point making it in the open. I know there's some Queen Creek people that think they should have been in the open. I disagree with that, but that's just me. I think those are the biggest takeaways that I'm hearing so far. You guys see anything different in those takeaways?
It'll be interesting with South Point just because it's so every year comparing 4A, 5A, 6A, it's always a little bit apples to oranges, but then at least we knew in previous years, everybody got 10 games. This is now some teams got 6, some teams got 8, some teams had to reschedule and, the day of and have games. So there's a complete different element here. So I think South Point probably belongs in there. I don't know about the 6 seed, but again, this is a team that hasn't really backed down from big time opponents in the past, and they're not going to against Saguaro. So they'll need to have a very good game to be in this with the SaberCats. But I think that they are a team that is definitely in the conversation for the Open.
Well, here's another thing to think about that in years past would have never been an issue is who's out for COVID quarantine or contact tracing, that week. You never know if your roster is the same. I know we played a game and Thursday night at 8:00, I got a call that 2 of our starters were going to be quarantined the next day. So what happens if that happens to one of these schools the night before a semifinal game or the state championship game?
Jason, is there a coach that you look at in this and postseason? I know that you're friends with lots of them. It's not one or the other, but it's just a coach you look at and say, really interested to see how he goes about this game against this team, either open or 6A.
There's a lot of guys that I really like and I really respect. I've known Coach Taylor at Centennial for a long time, and I played with his son, and he always has those teams ready. Really respect him. I already mentioned, Coach Bechtold over at Corona del Sol. Now that Corona is going to have a chance to be the sleeper, the Cinderella team, and be in the Open. I think that's pretty awesome. And I don't know. I don't not get along with any of these guys, really. They're all good guys. I think a lot of these people do it for the right reasons. But, if I'm looking at it, who's going to have these guys ready? I look at Coach Taylor, I think, or, Jason Mohn's been there, done that. He's got these guys through it. Rick's done a great job at Chandler last 2 years. Was he 20-0 with those squads? So you look to me, I look at the guys that have kind of been through the ringer and done it, and look up to those guys and look at their program and kind of see what they're doing, and hopefully I can emulate what those guys are doing and what they're putting on the field. Jordan,
before we get out of here, give me a couple players, or give the fans a couple of players that they may not have seen because they've been watching their teams so closely and their high school teams may be over, or it's the college football fan saying, well, I want to start paying attention here in the playoffs. It may be the obvious names. It may be the names that people may not have heard of. Here are some names, and I'll get Jason in on this one too, but who are some names of some players, Jordan, that fans should be looking at here in the Open in 6A that they may not have seen or heard about?
Well, I think, obviously the Open's going to have plenty. Along the defensive line of Saguaro, Quentin Somerville, Alani Ma'afu, Darian Dalton, and Tristan Monday. Monday is the one that is the underclassman of the group. He's the one that had the most sacks last year as a sophomore, and he was the one. And he in the offseason, he would remind me of that. And when I'd ask about learning from Quentin and Alani and all this stuff, and it wasn't in a cocky way. It was just like, just remember who had the most sacks. So he has that confidence about him. He's getting a lot of looks. They've also used him at tight end. I saw he caught a touchdown in their game against Gilbert. So they have some versatile athletes there. In terms of 6A, over at Highland, Ammon Allen is just a monster. He's a safety, plays so physical, is a great ball hawk. They've also recently moved him to wide receiver. And he'll put up those types of games where it's 12 catches, 130 yards, where he'll just pick up chunks at a time. And then the two running backs we've kind of alluded to is Jacob Cisneros and Max Davis. They've had, I think, quieter recruitments than maybe they deserve, but these guys are absolute workhorses over at Boulder Creek and Highland as well. So those are a couple of guys to look out for.
Well, I think look at Jacob Moore, the big tackle at Boulder Creek. That kid is a mauler. He gets after it on the offensive line, and they play him a little bit on the defensive line as well. State champ heavyweight wrestler. I really, really like him and how he plays football. Another guy's Jack Stam, safety at Liberty. They play like a joker type, kind of free runner, tough to block him basically, and he's the leader of a very good Liberty defense. And then the kid I liked him when we played against him, but then I really liked him last night was Kevon Clark, the sophomore running back at Centennial. Gosh, did he really come on here at the end of the year? And I'm going to have to play against him for 2 more years. I don't know if I'm looking forward to that.
and another guy. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
No, I'm good. But
another guy that has jumped out to me, I think the recruitment, we'll track this for the next couple of years, DeMond Williams Jr., the freshman quarterback over at Basha. And when we were talking about coaches, a guy that jumped out to me, Chris McDonald, the job that he's done for Basha, navigating a tough 6A, a lot of changes this year. And they're sitting here with it in 6A with a talented freshman quarterback, but seeing the growth over the past couple of weeks with DeMond and the big throws that he's been able to make, there's some real excitement, I think, over at Basha over the next couple of years. And Chris McDonald, I think, is just one of those very underrated coaches. Got it done when he was at Maricopa. Now, really turning the tide at Basha, and I think that they can be a really consistent program over the next couple of years.
Well, if we flip the coin, then you got to give a shout out over at Shadow Ridge. They beat Basha early in the year, and then they're a team that's 6-2, and they're the 8 seed. They were not a playoff team last year, and then another West Side team that was not a playoff team that now is a 3 seed, Central Day O'Connor. Finished 5-3, and no one's really talked about those guys, and they have a couple quality wins. Verado and Shadow Ridge, so they snuck in, and they're a 3 seed in the 6A playoffs.
Yeah, I'll go over a little bit on Jordan's end because I live out in the area. But when you look at where Basha and Castile are, because everything in the Chandler School District with fans has been Hamilton and Chandler, and rightly so. And when the Purdy's were at Perry, it was different. But Coach McDonald's doing a very good job. He had a couple transfers come in from Hamilton that came over this year. And the freshman quarterback, I saw him early in the season. He's a guy that you pour tomato juice in him, turn him sideways. He's a thermometer. He's just coming along. He's just a little freshman who I think has made huge strides. And I think Bobby Newcomb is one of the best kept secrets in coaching in the Valley in growing young men. I really like what he is all about in developing a program. They won 3A a few years back with Spencer Stowers. He left. Bobby came in, inherited a really tough situation where there were players that were promised playing time and things, and none of that happened under Bobby. And so he had some parents who weren't happy, tough situation. Let's not sugarcoat it. And he got them out of the program finally, eventually. Now he has his own people in. And I think this is a program that is doing it the right way, much like you, Jason, over at Brophy. You got to get the right people in place. And Bobby's been able to do that. He's got a quarterback that doesn't get a lot of recruitment in Dane Christensen. Dane's Faith, LDS, is one of those where the word is out. Is he going to go on his mission or not go on his mission? And I think that's hurt his recruitment to a certain extent. That's just the way it is when you have players that may go on a mission. He's really good, 70% completion ratio. Isaiah Newcomb has had a very good season. He's going to UCLA. They're wide receivers. They have speed. They did beat Boulder Creek. They did beat Queen Creek. Chaparral boat raced them. They had a couple of tough wins down the stretch against Desert Ridge and Red Mountain. And I think if you look at Basha and Castile, two teams that do not get a whole lot of attention out here, but just watch them and how they are coached and how they go about their business. I think Highland, Castile, to me, not because I'm close to the program, but just seeing those two teams. I did Highland against Chandler on Your View 2 weeks ago, and they had Highland had Chandler on their heels. So I don't think that's going to be a gimme. And I think Basha, with what Coach McDonald is doing, they're getting it done out here, and it's good to see.
Yeah, and it's, again, it's good when there's more than one power in the East Valley, like we were talking about on the West Side, having multiple teams come up at the right time. It's Arizona high school football is in a really good place right now. And that's one thing as we debate all of these teams, that means there's a lot of really good football teams in here. So that overall, that's a good thing. And that means that guys are moving on to the next level, and there's just quality programs throughout the entire state.
Yeah, because I haven't seen Shadow Ridge, Jason. I don't know. We can't get everywhere. You can hear and see some stuff on Twitter, but do you really think Shadow Ridge can make a push here?
I don't know if they're ready to make a push, but I mean, they're going to give Boulder Creek a good game, and I just, how they've progressed. They were a team that had a good freshman team. They were solid, JV team as well. And they were, I believe they were 500, last year on varsity. So they're improving, and that West Side's growing. The far West Side, really, that's where that is. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. But that, again, it's just like Jordan says, good for Arizona high school football to have these teams up and coming.
Okay, before we get out of here, I promise now, a team that throughout the boards you're looking at, I look at St. Mary's and say, this is good for high school football. St. Mary's in a postseason, Jason. I know it's the rivalry, but you have to feel good about that one.
I do, because I sent Coach Lucero a text message this morning telling him congrats. That's a big deal for him, his alma mater. Yeah. And Jose is a good friend of mine. He played at GCC just like I did, and I'm happy for him. Sunny Slope, 2 seed in 5A2. Another old friend of mine, another Washington Rams, Sam Jacobs, doing a good job over there. It's great.
Jordan?
In 4A, Casa Grande, being the 1 seed, Angel Flores, a very talented quarterback, hoping to see him throughout the playoffs. And then for Mesquite, if you haven't seen Ty Thompson in person at the high school level yet, make sure you do, because he is a special talent. And he's not gonna be a rah-rah guy, look at me guy. Like, make sure you give him the attention and go see him in person. Because if you can, is
he Spencer Rattler? Is he Tyler Shuck? Is he Brock Purdy? I mean, you say special.
He's in that zip code of all of them. And seeing what he's done at a non-traditional power, a program that hasn't been at the levels of the Chandlers or the Pinnacles or, some of these other bigger programs, what he's been able to do, how he's been able to develop. And really, after his freshman year, everyone was saying this is going to be a dude. And he has, I think, far surpassed our expectations of that. He's handled that really well. He's been a great advocate for the program, gone on the national stage at Elite 11 in some of these big time showcases, and delivered. So he's another one of that long line of very talented quarterbacks that is going to play at the next level and play some important college football games next year. So if you have a chance to see him, whether it's in person over stream, I know 2020 is a little bit different this year, but try to check out his film, because he is a very special talent.
I was so bummed I didn't get to go see him play. I was actually going to go out and watch Mesquite play Washington. And everyone knows I went to Washington High, and I was excited that the Rammies were in the playoffs for the first time since 2012. And they got shut down the day of the game, that Friday morning. So I felt bad for Tim Mayfield. Did a great job there. 6-1. They picked up a couple games midweek and had Washington back being relevant too in 4A. Mm-hmm.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks for chopping it up. Jason Jewell, head coach at Brophy Prep and an alum of Sports360AZ.com. And Jordan Ham, knows all, tells all, on the recruiting front, the recruiting coordinator for Sports360AZ.com. Thanks for being with us.